Do you know what is Education Cess? And what are its benefits? Please subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon to be the first one to receive the notification of our latest videos. You can also help us bring you the best and most reliable and updated information related to banking and finance by supporting us on patreon.com by just £1 a month. Link in the description. Hello and welcome to BankReed, where millions of people around the world can learn and be aware of banking and finance. So let's get started. Education Cess consists of primary education and secondary and higher education. Cess making a 3% of the tax payable. It is used to fund salaries, midday meals, infrastructure, special schemes and premier educational institutions in the whole country. What is Education Cess? Every time when you pay taxes, you will notice that the total tax which is payable by you tends to go up a small amount when it comes to final payment. This small amount can be an increase of a few percentages and is generally the Education Cess that is imposed on the taxes. This tax is only imposed on the tax that you have to pay and not on the income that is considered as taxable. The cess is imposed in two parts. The first is the primary education cess and the second is secondary and higher education cess. This cess is a type of income tax and is ultimately governed by the IT Act. The rate of the education cess is announced by the government itself when the budget is announced for the year. Education cess rate. The rate at which the education cess is calculated is actually a combination of the two parts of cess applied on the taxable income. For the education cess, the rate is 2% of the tax payable, and for the secondary and higher education cess the rate is 1% of the tax payable. They together form the education cess rate of 3% of the tax payable. How to calculate education cess? Let us take an example of Akash. He has an annual income of 8 lakh rupees, out of which he invests 30,000 rupees in life insurance and contributes 40,000 rupees to a PPF account. He also makes a contribution to the Kanya Samriddhi account of 20,000 rupees and invests 30,000 rupees in a pension scheme. This ultimately means that his total investments amounts to 1 lakh rupees in a year, which ultimately brings his taxable income down to 7 lakh rupees. Based on his investments mentioned above, the tax that he will have to pay is 65,000 rupees. On this particular tax he will pay a education cess of primary education cess 1,300 rupees at a rate of 2% of the tax payable, i.e. Rs 65,000.V. Secondary and higher education cess 650 rupees at a rate of 1% of the tax payable. This means that the total education cess which will be payable amounts to 1,950 rupees, which means that the income tax due for Akash is 66,950 rupees. Moreover, it needs to be keep in mind that as the education cess is only payable on the tax due, so if your income falls in the non-taxable bracket of the income tax slab, then you won't have to pay this cess. How is education cess used? As the name only suggests, this is a cess that is collected in order to enable the government to run the education programs and schemes that can help to improve the quality and access to education in the country. The money which has been collected by the government is earmarked for the following expenses. This cess is used to provide students with the midday meals. It is also used for setting up the government-aided schools and colleges. The staff of the government schools and colleges are also paid their salaries with this money. The government can also use this money to set up the education loans that are provided at lower rates to students to help them pay the fees for higher education. It can also be used to fund any special schemes like Rashtriya Madhyamik Shiksha Abhiyan, which ultimately aims at making secondary education more accessible. The money may also be used to fund special institutes like IIT and IIMs in the setting up of more branches in states which still don't have any access to these institutes. If the government plans on expanding the number of educational facilities for students, then the money collected as education cess can be ultimately used to fund the programs. Thanks for watching. We hope you learned something valuable today. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit the bell icon to be the first one to get the notification of all the upcoming videos.